my friends, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are new around here, I hope you will consider hitting the subscribe button and joining our little YouTube family. Polly's Paper Studio really does have the best peeps. So for today's card, I am doing another deep dive into my stash using a great collection from Authentic Paper. I'm also really enjoying lately stamping out my sentiments, so I'll be featuring a stamped birthday wish for this card, and I think this is a really sweet homespun country inspired design, so stick with me and we will make this together. Now, even though I have a little bit of a different layout for this card, I'm still going to go with my 6x6 top folding card base. I really like this size because I get a lot of use out of the paper and it doesn't create a lot of offcuts because I'm very bad about keeping up with my scraps. So I want to be able to use most of it, and so that I know I'm using it frugally. Here's my base. 110-pound cardstock is very important. It's very thick cardstock, and I'm going to add a lot of stuff to this card, and I want it to be very sturdy. I did finish the inside as I like to do so that it will be nicely coordinated, and then I'm going to begin layering on the top. So I'm going to bring in that collection. Now this is the Frontier collection, and I know that this predates my terms on the Authentic design team. So I've worked with them for several years now, and I know all of the collections I received while I worked there have the date on it, and this one does not. So I know that this is a fair few years old. However, I think all of these patterns are very classic. You're going to be able to mix and match any collection in your stash, I think, and come up with a very convincing dupe for this card. I'm going to put the plaid or the check pattern on the outside. I don't always do that when I'm layering up patterns because sometimes it's hard to see what the pattern is about when you put too many layers on, but a lot of this background is going to show this time. So I'll just add this to my card base, and I'm using really beautiful blue navy colored cardstock throughout, and that creates a great balance for these richer, darker colors. So now I've got my background on where I would normally be adding a foam layer and popping up a whole nother section. I'm going to include a strip running across the back in the middle, and I'm gonna reach for this wood grain in a red color. I used wood grain in my last card and everyone seemed to really enjoy it, and I believe that this has a very nice country homespun vibe to it, so it goes really well with that check. And so what I want to do is add some scalloped borders to this, but I think it would look nicer to have that solid blue as a cardstock border, just a straight border running across the top and bottom before I put that scallop on. And so I'm just going to do that. This is some of the offcuts that I created while I was working along, and I'm just going to tack that into place. You see there, and then I'll add my second side on. This is 110-pound cardstock again, by the way. I just happened to pick this up from Amazon, and it was from the Cardstock Warehouse. I really like the quality of their cardstock, as well as the fact that it is a solid core, so I don't have to worry about any of the white edges showing. Now I've got that border on. I'm going to bring in another layer of adhesive just so that I can tack on my scallops. So I'm just using my double-sided adhesive tape, and I'll run a row along each side for this, and then I'll use my craft knife to peel up that layer. So this makes it easier to get that paper off of the adhesive. Same thing as I did before. I'm just going to lay this border on. I'm going to line that up right where the scallop meets the strip in the back. So that will be a very good way to keep everything straight and even. It's just to make sure that I have that lined up with the scallop. You see now that looks really sweet and gives it a lot of detail. Of course, I have to do the same for this side as well. And this will match up with the pattern paper on the check pattern. So if I have a little bit of that over the edge. It's not going to show because it will line up with my blue cardstock border. And I've got to put more tape on here to secure it to the card base. You guys can let me know what collection you've had in your stash the longest. I know I've had a few for quite a while. I don't think this one is the oldest, but I did reach for this one today, so I'm going to shuffle it to the front and hopefully maybe come up with some additional projects that I can use it up and then find another one to get into. So here is that stripe with my scalloped detail, and that's just going right in the middle. You see I can take advantage of that border strip that I laid down, and this will be a great background for my stamp sentiment. I'm going to, let me just show you this border strip real quick first. So this will cut out that scallop. It's a double scallop, and then it has a straight edge. So that's really nice. This came from Sizzix, and I can use that to keep everything nice and straight and even. So I'm using a sentiment that came from a, ooh, that's hard to see, sheet that was handed down from a crafty friend. So this is not a newer collection, and I don't even actually know where it comes from because it didn't have its packaging. But really what I liked about it was that it was a compact sort of sentiment. It had some different fonts, and that makes it interesting. And then there was also a border that helps to fill in the space. So if you have a specific square die that you want to use, you can help fill in that space with that stamped border. I went ahead and stamped that on my offcut of 110 pound cardstock so that I would have a good crisp image. It took a couple of tries with my ink and my stamping platform, so I got that well stamped on here, and I put a little adhesive on the back just to do myself a favor. And for this project, what I want to do is trade out my usual doily. I cut a lot of doilies with white cardstock. I'm going to use the die that I would have cut my doily with. Instead of going with white cardstock, I went with wood grain. It did come with this collection, but I think any kind of solid color cardstock would work just as well. This has a little bit of pattern on it, but it doesn't contrast so much that it's going to be busy. So this die came from Gina Marie Designs, and I cut that out of my cardstock. And then I used this second square. Now I wish I had the same set for all of these so that I would have my stitching detail, but I just didn't have the right size of nesting squares. When I worked down, there was too much of a gap. But this one does come from Gina Marie, so this is an inside out stitched detail square, and I just cut that center out. So that left me a nice border with a stitching detail on the edge. And then I went in with my Sizzix square. So this is just another set of nesting squares, and that worked pretty well to showcase that stamp sentiment. There was just enough room in there for all of that pretty stamped border. So I'm using a set of nesting, but from different manufacturers. And then I've got my wood grain pattern on just some double-sided adhesive tape. I'm going to line up my center portion and then work backwards so that I can get all of my border layers even, hopefully on the first try. Sometimes it's hard when you're filming because it just seems like it's hard to get over top of it to see very well. So I may pull this out of screen just a little bit. For this border is more of that blue cardstock, and it's nice that it is the thicker cardstock again because this is going to be a popped up layer. I have a little bit of foam adhesive on that, like double-sided adhesive. Came from Dollar Tree. I don't know if where you are you have the craft section in the Dollar Tree, but I found this there and it works pretty well. It's not super thick, and so I think this will work. And what I'm trying to achieve is sort of an inset frame, and I think this will look really smart with the blue border because it matches all of the other borders on the card. So I'm just pulling this tape off very carefully, and I'm going to pull my stamped image just out of frame a little so that I can see over top and get it measured correctly as I can. So I'm really happy with the placement of that. And now what I can do is add my wood grain frame over top, and that will complete this sort of raised section. So let me take the tape off of here. I don't very often cut pattern paper with my dies that have a scalloped edge because it can look busy sometimes, but I think this wood grain looks really nice and it has that cutout shape. So that's really pretty. I'm gonna pull my square out of frame again just because it's important to me to get this as straight as I can. With a square, it's easy to notice when things get off center. So I'm trying to get that as close as I can. So yeah, I'm happy with that. And so here will be my sentiment, and this is taking place of my usual doily with all the layers stacked on top. So now this is recessed, and I'm gonna add this slightly left and top of my card because I did create a larger flower arrangement. I want to make sure to leave room for that. So thankfully I've already added my adhesive here to the back. I'm just going to add that here. I really think this combination of wood grains looks nice together because the wood grain is acting as a frame for my sentiment. So here's my flower arrangement, and I've picked a pretty focal flower from Little Birdie Crafts. I have a couple here from Really Reasonable Ribbon as well. I'm going to link those in the description. And then I've got some loopy twine bows and some different leaf dies. I created sort of a foliage layering with the green on the bottom. And then this is another lighter wood grain, and I just thought that would look very nice and natural. Sometimes I go for a metallic, but for this card it did seem like it wanted to be more of a natural combination, so I did that. And this is just going to go right here in the corner. I'll add that with my hot glue gun to make sure it's very secure. Now you can see why I left plenty of room for that in the corner. That pretty bow is created with my navy wrinkle ribbon that is also from Really Reasonable Ribbon. And now I've got just a couple charms. These are very sweet, and I was inspired by the country kind of arrangement here, and so I've got just a couple, and I'm going to hold them in place as I do so that I can get the placement correct. I tied them together so I know they will land exactly where I want them. And don't come at me in the comments about this glue gun because I know it is a hot mess, literally, but it works like a charm, so I'm just going to keep on using it. And I'm putting those tails into the glue to secure it. Then I'll just remove the excess twine, and I'm going to top it with this pretty vintage button. I always put string through my buttons so that I know that glue will catch on that natural material and really hold things secure and they won't pop off later. So that's something to keep in mind if you're adding buttons as part of your embellishments. And then last but not least, here is a couple more little buttons for the side, and I think this sort of helps to fill in this space pretty well. Now, because these are actual vintage buttons, they do have kind of a ivory tone to them. They're not just exactly white, and that is working perfectly with the ivory in the background of that check pattern for my background. So I really think those work really well together. And thanks to the magic of editing, you will not be seeing me glue that button to my finger, which did hurt quite a lot. And so that's it for my homespun country inspired card today. I hope you all enjoyed the deep dive into my stash and seeing some of my regular details and rethinking how I apply them to my card design, like using this wood grain frame rather than my usual die cut doily. Remember, you can find links in the description below for our Really Reasonable Ribbon and all our social media sites. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, our blog, and our Etsy shop. If you enjoyed this project, make sure you give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you'll be alerted every time we add new content. And as always, I'm wishing you a happy and productive day, and I thank you so much for watching. Bye!